Print Radio. Here's a short interview featuring In Print's Philip Warden talking with mystery novelist Patricia Rockwell.
Thank you for joining me, Patricia.
I'm glad to be here, Philip.
So I want to ask you a few questions about your book, of course, but first and foremost, why a writer? Why did you want to write?
Well, I've always liked mysteries. I've been a mystery reader for a long time, and I've enjoyed reading them so much, I guess, that once I retired and had an awful lot of free time, which I discovered like 2 days after I retired, that I thought maybe this would be a fun thing to try to do, to see if I could write one myself.
And you succeeded in that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I feel like I succeeded in it. I succeeded enough that I went ahead and wrote a bunch more.
Well, let's talk about the book you have here, okay. Sounds of Murder.
Sounds of Murder, yes, that's the very first mystery I wrote. First in a series of 5, the Pamela Barnes Acoustic Mystery Series. It follows a university professor. She's a psychology professor at a small southern university. She is an acoustics expert. And what happens is that one day she happens to fall upon a dead body in the computer lab at her department. It turns out that this person in her department has been strangled to death in the computer lab, sitting at one of the computer monitors, and the police, when they arrived, discovered that inadvertently she has nudged one of the buttons on the monitor with her elbow and has accidentally created an audio tape of the murder itself. They have no clues to go on, so they asked Pamela to assist them because she is an acoustics expert. She knows all about sound. So she listens to the actual tape of the murder being conducted in the computer lab, and it sounds something like and, the police are mystified as to what that could mean and how that could lead them to finding the killer. But Pamela thinks she might have a way to assist them if she can actually analyze those sounds. And so she takes it upon herself to try to figure out what the sounds are on the tape other than just the because the dead body is strangled by one of the cords from one of the headphones in the computer lab. But there are other sounds that they don't know what the meaning is. And so she tries to figure out what those sounds are on that murder tape. And as she progresses through and tries to figure out what they are, she gets closer and closer to discovering the identity of the murderer. And as you can well imagine what happens in many murder mysteries, the murderer, him or herself, becomes aware of her efforts and may decide to eliminate her in the process. So that's where we go with Sounds of Murder. And she's so successful, obviously, in helping the local police that when another murder comes up that also has sound clues, and she delves right into that. So there's 4 other sound adventures in Pamela's series.
I've watched CSI and stuff,
yes,
forensic evidence.
Yes.
I've never heard of sound.
Well, actually, there have been some episodes, I think, on CSI and some of the similar shows that have used sound clues. There was also a show on that I think it's off the air now, but it was called
Lied to Me?
Lied to Me, that's it. And they did an awful lot of analysis of people, criminals oftentimes, who were lying. And they utilized an awful lot of technology, particularly sound, verbal sound clues, vocal sound clues that the potential liar or criminal might be exhibiting through their vocal features. That's very common practice to use those kinds of acoustic clues to determine whether someone is lying. But it can be used for other things, and as Pamela uses them to track down murderers. And in the books to come, she looks at the sounds that are made by, actual objects. And the second book that comes out, the second book that follows this book is called FM for Murder. And what happens is a DJ is killed on air. And he's all alone at night in the radio station, and someone shoots him. Everybody that's listening to his very popular radio show at 2 a.m. hears the murder occur. So there are witnesses to the crime. It's just that nobody's there to see it, so nobody knows who the killer is. But Pamela is able to take a recording of that murder of the DJ and the sound of the gun going off and everything else that happens preceding that and track down the killer. So it might be the sound of a gun, it might be the sound of someone being strangled, it might be the sound. In the third book, she has a coach that is murdered, and he's evidently having some affairs with various women, and all we have as a clue is his voice messages on his cell phone. And they are from a variety of women who nobody can place them. So we assume that they're probably various women that he is fooling around with, and she has to track them down using only the sound of their voices to try to figure out who they are. And so it goes along like this. And in each book, there's a different kind of sound. It might be the sound of a human voice. It might be the sound of squeezing someone's neck. It might be the sound of objects doing something or other, or bullets, some sort of sound.
So enhancing sound in the background, basically.
Yeah, it might be background sound. It might be right in the foreground, for example, the bullet in the second one. That's a very foreground sound. I mean, it's the loudest thing that happens on the tape. But she is able to analyze that sound by extracting it, wholly stretching it out, looking at the different formants of it, looking at the lower pitches of it, the lower frequencies, and looking at it and investigating it and trying to figure out how that sound can be applied to figure out how that murder was committed or who it could have been, and all sorts of other issues that the police, this is a very small town, it's a school town, so the local police don't have a forensics acoustic expert working for them, but she's happy to oblige them and use her knowledge to assist them on these various crimes.
Why sound?
You write about what you know. Most of my life, I was a university professor. I did all of my research in vocal behavior, and I used acoustic technology to analyze a lot of the vocal behavior that I studied, and thus that's where my knowledge comes from. Now, admittedly, on some of the books, I have to go outside my knowledge. For example, I have no knowledge of ballistics. And in my second book, she does a lot of acoustic analysis of the gunshot. And I know a lot about sound, but I don't know anything about bullets. So I had to do an awful lot of extra research on that. But my knowledge and my background and my expertise is in sound, but it's more in the sound of the human voice than it is really in the sound of objects or bullets or anything like that. But sound in general, and then specifically sound of the human voice. So the show that I mentioned earlier was a really interesting show to me because so much of it focused on how you could determine whether someone is lying to someone based upon the sound of their voice alone, not on what they say to you, but on how they say it to you. And actually, a lot of my doctoral research dwelled on just that issue. And I did a lot of analysis of people that were lying and that were telling the truth based upon and trying to determine whether people could tell the difference between a liar and a truth teller on the sound of their voice alone. I guess you probably know that most people can't. Most people think they can, but most people are not very good at detecting lies. Do you think you're good at detecting lies?
No, I'm not. I have to admit that. Of course, I don't really look for lies.
You have what is called a truth bias. The majority of people have what's called a truth bias. That is, when you're with someone that's a friend, you assume that they're telling you the truth. Wow. That's why it's much easier to lie to someone who is a close friend than it is to lie to somebody you don't know at all. It's much easier to lie to somebody you don't know because they don't know your mannerisms, they don't know your behavior, they don't know your background. So they really don't have anything to compare you to. Whereas if it's someone that you are very familiar with, you're going to assume that they're telling you the truth. And we do that. We assume, no matter how foolish the person's statement is, we tend to say, oh yeah, well, that does sound a little crazy, but I know this guy, he would never lie to me. That's a truth bias. The opposite of that, which is a lie bias, is something that many people that are in, let us say, law enforcement, security professions, like customs agents, people that do interrogation for the government, they tend to have a lie bias because they tend to assume that people who they're interrogating are telling them a lie because that's what they've been trained to do. They've been trained to deal with people that are telling lies. So they just assume that they have a lie bias.
What you mentioned about close friend, or I mean, even a child to his mother, it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll believe you for that one. Didn't work too well for me when I spilled my juice one time. It's like, why did you spill juice? I'm like, Mom, I didn't. There was a camel. It came in. She let me go on that one. But.
Yeah, right. Kids are notoriously bad at lying, and once you get to the point when you're at an age where you can lie and get away with it to your parents, I mean, isn't that a great day? I mean, when you realize you've pulled one over on your folks and they believe you.
I would like to go on record by saying I have never done that.
I've never done that.
My mom listens to this podcast.
Listens to you. Right. I could also tell you that my other major area of research was also into sarcasm and the vocal behaviors that people exhibit when they're being sarcastic. And I was really interested in those two areas because I feel like lying and sarcasm are the opposite sides of the same post, so to speak, that when you are lying, you are saying something that is false, but you expect people to believe it. When you're being sarcastic, you are saying something that is false, but you don't expect someone to believe it. So, for example, if I were to say, it's a beautiful day today, okay, if it's raining cats and dogs, and I want you really to believe that it's a beautiful day today, I'm going to lie to you, right? I'm going to say, oh, it's a beautiful day today, and hope you'll drive me to the airport or whatever that I want to get you to do. If I'm being sarcastic, I don't expect you to do anything or whatever, and I don't expect you to believe me, so I'm going to go, it's a beautiful day today, right?
Right.
How are you going to know that I'm telling a lie the first case and not telling a lie the second case? I said exactly the same thing. I said, it's a beautiful day today. One case, I'm lying to you. One case, I'm being sarcastic. What do you use to determine what I mean?
The way you said it, and
right, the sound.
What's actually happening?
Well, assuming the curtains are closed.
Okay.
And you can only go on the sound of my voice. Sarcasm is something that we tend to learn maybe 8, 9, 10 age is the age where kids learn to do it and to pick it up, maybe a little bit older than that. Once kids learn sarcasm and can pick it up from their parents, then parents have lost an edge, so to speak. If your mother says to your dad, oh boy, wait till you hear what Johnny did today. He was fabulous, and Johnny goes, oh, yay, Mom thinks I was fabulous. And he doesn't realize that Mom didn't mean that at all. Yeah. Kids don't understand sarcasm. They don't understand it up until about, as I said, 9 or 10. And then once they do, it comes in gradually and they start to learn that there's a difference in the way people sound when they're being sarcastic. And that opens a world up to children as to what they can understand from what their parents are telling them. I mean, I guess you can still spell things out to them, but you can't just use head tips and, and squeezing your eyes together and stuff anymore, because kids will start to pick up on that at about that age.
Thank you very much for letting me find out a bit more about Pamela's work and how she solves things. So I look forward to hearing about what else she does.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you.